We are in the final week of the college football regular season, and one of the biggest matchups in the SEC so far this season is going to be taking place this week. The winner-take-all game between Texas and Texas A&M in the SEC. These two teams haven't faced each other for almost a decade. Now they're facing each other as conference foes in the Southeastern Conference, and it couldn't be if the stakes of this game could not be any higher than they are for this game. The winner, whoever wins, goes to the SEC Championship game and faces Georgia to claim a first-round bye in the college football playoff. Going over some of these stats right here, I'm going to go over the resume of each of these teams first. Then we'll go over the schedule and then some in-depth stats. But right now, just some surface-level resume stats. Texas, as you see, has faced the 57th rated offenses average, while Texas A&M has faced 37th. But Texas has definitely faced a little better defenses than A&M, as they ranked 16th and A&M ranks 35th. And their strength of schedules are not terrible, but they're not elite either. They're both outside the top 40. Not easy to any stretch, but definitely not one of the difficult stretch here, as you can see. And finally, the tier win-loss record you see below. This is based off of opponents' power rated in these four different segments. Tier 1 is 1 through 25, at least neutral site, and then Tier 2, Tier 3, 2, 4. It's kind of like the quad system in college basketball. But either way, Texas has 2 Tier 1 wins, but it's a little skewed because both Michigan and Oklahoma are both considered Tier 1 wins because Michigan was on the road. They just made that cusp, and Oklahoma was a neutral site game, and Oklahoma, I think, is just made that cusp as well. So those two, in reality, could be Tier 2 games, with their only Tier 1 game being against Georgia. But overall, they faced, 6 total Tier 1 and Tier 2 opponents, while A&M has faced 7. This will be their 8th for the whole season. As you can see in this next slide, the schedule, A&M's faced Notre Dame, South Carolina, LSU, and Florida as their 4 Tier 1 opponents so far. They've split those, went 2-2. Absolutely destroyed them in South Carolina a few weeks ago, 44-20. They had that bad loss to Notre Dame week 1. Not bad loss, but lost by 10. But then they went on to win their first 5 games in conference, start off 5-0 in the SEC, before they obviously lost their last 2 to South Carolina and Auburn, which is a 4 overtime thriller. They lost only by 2. But in the same aspect, Texas has not really played that tough a schedule. Like they said, they played Michigan on the road. That's considered still a Tier 1 game because Michigan improved over the last couple weeks. But, I mean, ULM, UTSA, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky. That really jumps out at you, as a elite schedule. But either way, they got the 10-1 this season. The only loss was in Georgia, back in mid-October, and they could very well face them yet again. But either way, that's the schedule for both these teams, how it kind of shapes out. Going over some surface level stats here. Texas is top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, while A&M is basically at number 40 in both of those. Total offense, Texas is 18th, while A&M's defense is 56. But the big difference here would be Texas' defense is 2nd, while A&M's offense is 44th. So that'll be one of the keys I'll look at here in these in-depth stats here in the next slide. But another big stat here, the passing offense and defense. Texas is in top 15, number 14 in offense, while they're number 1 in passing defense, while A&M is outside the top 60 in both offensive and defensive passing efficiency. So like I said, that will be probably one of the biggest mismatches here, as you see in this next slide, where we go into some in-depth stats and see who has the biggest mismatch. Some of these stats here, you see that Texas is first in yards per play allowed, and they're first in adjusted points allowed per minute, while Texas A&M is basically 50th in both of those. That was one of the biggest mismatches. They're kind of a stalemate here in how much of their possessions reach the red zone and how much end in a touchdown, both offensively and defensively, as you see right there in the middle. But as you see at the bottom there, rushing yards per attempt and rushing yards allowed per attempt are basically even, but the only advantage that Texas has here is the adjusted yards added per attempt they allow versus A&M, what they actually do on offense. It's a big mismatch here. But I think the biggest difference in this matchup, I guess what will be the deciding factor will be right here in the middle. Passing yards allowed per attempt versus what A&M actually puts up per pass attempt. Texas is first in passing yards per attempt and passing attempts per interception caused on defense, while A&M is not doing very well in either of those categories. They're 42nd and 73rd in those offensive categories, respectively. And I think with Texas, one of the best scoring defenses overall, and having one of the better adjusted pass rush rating, as you see, they're right there in the middle. They're 11th. That means that Texas not only does not allow many passing yards per attempt, not only do they get the most interceptions per pass attempt, but they are also in the top 11 with getting to the quarterback at the most times, while A&M is outside the top 40 in each of those three categories and allowing that to happen to themselves. And I feel like that will be the biggest difference. If A&M doesn't get the passing going, even if their quarterback is decent on the run, if they cannot pass the ball, if they cannot get enough time, get the quarterback situated, if he's back there, having happy feet, he's just bouncing around, getting sacked every few plays, and if Texas is turning the ball over in the passing game, then I think this will be a long day for A&M. I wouldn't say a long day, but I think this will be the main factor into why Texas will ultimately win this game, finish the regular season 11-1, and make Texas A&M basically go from possibly a chance of getting a top 4 bye all the way to maybe a mid-tier, New Year's Day game that means absolutely nothing to their program. But in the end, I think Texas wins this game. They advance to the SEC title game, get a rematch versus Georgia, and I do believe in the end they will get their comeuppance and get their win back against the Bulldogs and get the 12-1 and probably a top 3 seed overall in the CFP playoffs.